Are you journeying through grief and needing a little extra support, inspiration, healing, and guidance? Join me in turning your losses into gains. Hi, my friend. I'm Tara Accardo, creator of the Losses Become Gains online community, blog, and now podcast. I'm an only child who lost both parents to cancer within 6 months of each other, followed by my sweet fur baby soon after. After all of this, I knew I was meant to do more with what I had been through. And now, that means supporting and empowering grievers just like you. I'm a wife, friend, grieving daughter, writer, course creator, loss advocate turned grief coach, and I'm here to support you and move you through your grief. I want for you to feel like I'm your friend in the grief space and know that whatever you're going through, there's someone out there who just gets it. Few topics are off limits here because grief and loss don't hold back either. We'll get into the nitty-gritty of what all of this means for you, some coping tools, lifestyle topics, and impactful mindset shifts to take you from just surviving to thriving after loss. So grab a cup of your favorite beverage, get comfortable, and show up with an open heart and mind. I'm so glad you're here. Hello, and welcome back to the Losses Become Gains podcast. I'm your host, Tara Accardo, and today I am here with a very raw, very vulnerable, very honest solo episode as a reflection on 4 years without my mom, Lori Jordan. And this episode is releasing a couple of days before my mom actually died, but 4 years ago on December 9th, 2019, my mom died to her difficult and frankly quite brutal and graphic to watch journey with esophageal cancer. So really your gain today is to not only get to know my mom a little better here and there, but really to just have a very real conversation about the pain around losing a mother or a mother figure and what this actually looks like, especially over a little bit of time, because I'm 4 years out from this now. And it's really interesting. I love doing reflection episodes like this. I did this with my dad previously earlier this year. And I think it's just a really interesting and important milestone, if you will, and something to really just take a moment to process and look back on and be like, what have I learned? How have I grown? What is coming up for me now? And so finally, the other aspect of this episode is just to share some things that have been on my heart lately while navigating life without her, in hopes that you or someone you know can resonate with this today. So, that being said, if you know someone who might benefit from this episode, I would love for you to share it. I would be so appreciative because, especially being pregnant, as I am currently recording this year is hitting a little harder than usual, if I'm being honest. And I will get more into that in a bit. But this episode felt really needed and timely today, and especially in this time of year as we're approaching the holidays. So I just wanted to share some reflections and learnings and realizations in case it can help anyone else out there journeying through the death or impending loss of a mother figure as well. Because let me tell you, I experienced some hardcore anticipatory grief with my mom's health decline as well. So really here, we're not only just talking about the death itself, but at least in my case, everything leading up to her passing. But honestly, whether or not you've lost a mother specifically, I have no doubt some of the things that I will say or get into in this episode will be really relatable for you in so many ways, because I always say this, at the end of the day, loss is loss. And that is not to compare to anyone else's. What I mean by that is we experience loss and grief differently, right? We're all individuals. We all have our own circumstances. We might technically have different losses in life, or maybe if we even have the same ones, like there's many people out there that have lost their moms, right? And the thing is, our loved ones impacted us in different ways, and we're all on our own journeys here. But I think the most beautiful part of grief, one of the most beautiful parts of grief, is how it can bring us all together at the end of the day in this grief club, as we call it, this proverbial club that none of us asked to be in, but find ourselves in. And I just think it's important to acknowledge. And these, again, rather depressing milestones like a death anniversary, I think it's important to acknowledge and to reflect back on. So if this can help anyone out there today, you or someone you know, and just help someone feel a little bit less alone or a little more seen, that is my goal. So if you're watching this on YouTube, I've got my mom's little gold hoops on. I've got this pink sweater on that was not hers, but she said she always loved me in light pink. So I am wearing this in honor of her today. And I'm just going to go with it. I don't have a ton planned. I always sort of, just full transparency, have sort of like a rough draft sort of what I want to say, bullet points I want to hit on. This episode is sort of no different. I want to make sure I'm saying everything I want to say here, but I also really just wanted to kind of allow the flow of this episode and just have a very real and very vulnerable conversation where, tell you a little bit about my experience, but it's also not all about me. I just want to tell you how I'm feeling, what's coming up for me, and in hopes that it can maybe help you too, or just validate some of what you've been experiencing. So, with that being said, I just wanted to kind of start with a little bit of who my mom was. I can never really bring myself to say was. It's so hard. But she, again, her name is Lori Jordan. She was, I believe, 62. 62, yeah, when she died. And I want to first, though, focus on what a light she was in this world. And you hear so many people describe their loved ones like that, and, that they were just a ray of sunshine whenever they walked into the room. But really, guys, she embodied the sun. I can't say it in a more poetic way than that. She just had this energy about her. She was a Taurus. She had such Taurus energy. She was vibrant and just unapologetically herself, almost to a fault. Sometimes she was very aloof and didn't always have the most awareness in the world, but we kind of love that about her. Like, she would just walk into the middle of the street and like almost not even look for cars, kind of a thing. And my dad and I would always laugh, and that was the very kind of dark joke, is we're like, Lori, you're going to get hit by a car one day because you just think you own this place, and everyone's just gonna break for you. It was really funny. But she was just funny. She was so funny. She had this just unique sense of humor, this amazing laugh. She had this Pee Wee Herman laugh that she would do sometimes that was so funny. I can just, I'm hearing it in my head now, and it was just so quirky and so cute. She just wanted to make other people happy. She was an amazing host. Like, I just remember so many holiday meals and gatherings and things where, she was just the hostess with the mostest. She was just so good at it. I did not inherit that. I'm not going to lie. She's an amazing cook. She tried to teach me, you guys, I am not the best cook out there. I mean, I can put some things together. She did make me learn a French chicken recipe. She was like, if you are having people over, you need to have at least one or two dishes that you can confidently make in your repertoire. So now the kind of joke, the ongoing joke between my husband and I is that all I can make is French chicken, but I can do a little more than that. But she really instilled that in me. And just manners, right? Just being a good person, a good host, thinking of the little things, those little details, and just being really, as it's funny because as aloof as she was also very mindful of other people. And she was incredibly in tune with other people. I mean, the energetics of my mom, of this woman, of this being, this soul that she was here, was like nothing I've ever seen. It's so hard describing it now. It's just one of those things you had to experience in person, sort of. But um, the way I love to describe her is she was just like the walking epitome of the color yellow. I know that's such a funny way to describe her, but I could go on about how compassionate and empathetic and goofy and, how seriously she didn't take life. She just was herself. But I really just can't express enough the, again, I keep coming back to the word vibrancy that she brought to this physical earth, to so many people's lives. The people that she worked with, friends and family who just loved and cherished her. I mean, she was just fun to be around. She was a good time. She was crazy. She was a little crazy in her youth. She was something else. She was a character. That and so many things more I miss about her. So I wanted to start this conversation off with that, just sharing a little bit about her. I don't even feel like anything I just said did her justice. I'll be very honest. She was just so tenderhearted, but bullheaded at the same time, super adventurous, but vulnerable, but just so fun. She was just so fun. That's the thing I miss the most. She was my best friend. She's my best friend. So to just kind of shift this into her journey with cancer, because that is a part of her journey here. That is part of this episode. Very, very, very long story short, I will genuinely try and keep this on a more concise, in a more concise way here. But, and if you've listened to previous episodes of this podcast, you will have heard some of this. I just have never really gone into quite this much detail. But basically, to back up even further, my mom had dealt with GERD, which I'm no doctor, I'm no expert. It's like kind of similar to acid reflux. Please, if there's any doctors or medical professionals here, don't at me with this. But in my experience with what I saw her cope with was it was similar to acid reflux, and it got to a point in her life, in her, I mean, her 50s, but the early 60s, like where she was, where it was almost to the point where she couldn't keep food down. In fact, I remember this one instance, her and I were at IKEA randomly, and we were literally sitting in the food court having their iconic meatballs, just eating. And she started choking. It kind of wasn't going down. And this was at a point when her GERD and all of her digestive issues, she has just had digestive issues since her 20s. This was nothing new for her, but things were shifting, things were changing, and it was very unsettling. I remember being at that lunch and even a couple people were looking over is she okay? It was really intense. And so this was in kind of early-ish 2019 that happened. And then there came a night, I believe this was after that instance, where I was a town over from where my parents lived, and my now husband, boyfriend at the time, and me and his family were all going out to dinner. And we get to the restaurant, we hadn't even sat down, and my dad calls me. And he's like, "Hey, just so you know, mom just came out into the living room, gasping for breath. She cannot breathe. I'm taking her to the emergency room." And I was like, "What?" It was shocking, but of course, with some of the other issues she had been having, I mean, literally, you guys, she would eat and some of it would come up. So we knew she had some issues, and I will just say this, she did not really believe in Western medicine. She was not a prescription girl. She didn't really go to the doctor. She was very holistic in her way. She was Eastern medicine, acupuncture, all this, which I think is amazing. And that was very much how I was raised, and I'm very much in line with that. But, when there's some things going on. That was just like, that was one of my biggest guilts and regrets that I had after she died, or like even during her journey, is like, oh my God, why didn't my dad and I like push her harder to go to the doctor? Right? Like, if you're having these types of issues that are so intense, that are getting worse, like, get a scan, do an extra, do something, right? Frustrating. It can be very frustrating. But at the end of the day, I'm just going to sidebar for just a second. Like, at the end of the day, if you have a loved one dealing with something like that, or even whether it's anything like my mom's situation or not, but they don't go to the doctor. My father-in-law is like this, will not go to the doctor for anything. You know, it's their life, it's their journey here. We can only do so much as supporters, as bystanders. We can insist, we can push, we can do all the things, but we can't force anyone really to do anything. So that is how I eventually let go of a lot of that guilt and regret. But please know that is something I have very much struggled with. So really, and I'll be honest with you, first of all, I was completely distraught, obviously, at that dinner. I can't even remember if my dad was just like, don't come for right now, I'll keep you posted, whatever, because clearly I would have just gone and been there. But again, I think the timeline now is so hairy, but the long and short of it is, it was around May or June of 2019 is when she was diagnosed with this esophageal cancer. And I actually didn't know this at first. My parents kind of kept this part from me for a little while, which I had some thoughts and feelings about, trust me. But there was a 10-inch tumor in her esophagus that was growing into her airway. And all the things. I mean, that is massive. And mind you, my mom was like 5 feet tall, barely. Like, she was a very short, petite, short blonde hair, curly haired woman. Like, we really don't look a lot alike, although some people say we do, which I love and appreciate so much. But I digress. That's big, right? That is a big tumor for such a small, it's a big tumor for anybody. Okay. But that for her frame, that's what was causing a lot of these problems. We had no idea. We had no idea. It had just escalated to that point. And I'll just say this now, like, we didn't really know this at the time, because she did do chemo, she did radiation. They ended up putting 2 stents in her airway and all the things. It was too far gone. It was just caught too late. It was absolutely caught too late. And so that point on, they got on her treatment as fast as they could. I believe she did chemo first, if I'm remembering correctly. Honestly, I can't even remember if it helped or not. It even shrunk it just a little bit. It might have a little, but it was just really aggressive. Other than being caught too late, it was very aggressive. It was even up into her throat. That's when they ended up doing some radiation. I remember seeing the radiation, like scarring and things, which they told us was going to happen. But I honestly think one of the most traumatic parts of all of this, at least for me and my dad, and her too, of course, quite frankly, was the fact that it was when they were about to put the second stent into her, I guess, airway. She had already had one in there. They were going to put another one. And they were like, I think it was determined that wouldn't even do anything. It wouldn't even help. So they were like, we're doing a tracheotomy instead, because she cannot breathe. Like, it's getting worse. And she'll get to a point where that's going to stop functioning. And I mean, literally that could have killed her, right? Because your airway's blocked. You can't breathe. So I just remember, and I wish I remembered my last conversation with her. I don't even think I remember that last conversation or the words. All I remember from that morning, and we're in California, she was at UCSF in San Francisco. And I just remember her texting us, literally texting us and telling us this. And we were like, what? No time to process. And they did the trach, and I never heard her speak again. Literally never heard her speak again for the remainder of her physical life here. And if you or anybody you know have had experience with a tracheotomy or know somebody who has, I mean, my mom's situation was also pretty dire because she had these allergy issues her whole life. I mean, I won't belabor this, but she was in such a level of hell. I mean, when you think about like the quality of life of your loved ones and what you wouldn't wish on anybody, I mean, that's pretty much what my mom went through. It was horrific. Um, I mentioned earlier in the episode, it was just very graphic. So I'm not going to go into detail here. That's not really what this episode is about anyway. um, but these are a lot of the things I've had to process, right? I was mentioning some anticipatory grief. I was grieving her before she died. Hands down. It was, we grieve a lot of things, right? We grieve the lack of their presence when they actually leave us in this physical world. But, if you're listening and you know this, like, if you're losing someone to any type of disease or cancer or whatever illness, anything this looks like, dementia, right? Like, and their cognitive function or their physical function is not the same. Like, they just are not and cannot be the person that you're used to and that they've always been for you. You grieve that. You're already starting that process before they're even gone. So that's kind of what happened. But I was also just in a huge state of denial that she was actually going to die. And I don't think I even thought that that was possible or was actually going to happen until probably at least a couple weeks before she actually died. And that was around Thanksgiving. And I remember my dad and I were gunning for her to come home for Thanksgiving. We thought she even might be a little bit better by then, or could at least be released for like a short time or something. Not even close. Like, she was able to be up and walking around and stuff, but she was so frail. And we were just not super well equipped to take care of her. I remember my dad and I were petrified, you guys, terrified of having to take care of her and her trach, because we would have had to do, like, again, this is a bit graphic, but like we would have had to do and help her with a lot of the suctioning. I mean, she truly needed a level of care that we were just terrified that we would not be able to give her. So May, June-ish through December comes around, and I remember, she was definitely getting worse. We could really see the decline was getting quicker, but she still had her wits about her. There was still some functioning, even though she couldn't speak. I could kind of tell she was rounding this corner, and she was getting to be just more exhausted with it all. Like, not that she had like given up or given in at all. But I could just feel this shift, right? And so there came a point where it was like a Friday or Saturday or something, and we had found out that my dad was home at my parents' house. I was living with my boyfriend in a town over at the time. And we had found out that they had moved her from like the unit she was in, which was, round the clock care, but it wasn't the ICU, to the ICU. Like, in fact, I think it's from what we took from them, she kind of demanded that. She was like, I literally cannot breathe. So they moved her. We found that out, like, I don't know, I think it happened on a Saturday, but we didn't find out until very early Sunday. So this is Sunday, December 8th at this point. We go up to this city called Santa Rosa. This was north of where both of us were living. And we are there all day with her. And my cousin even came out. Thankfully, my cousin, shout out to Brendan if he's listening, he was like the son my parents never had. I'm an only child and I'm the only girl. So it was really special that he could come out for that. And in the ICU, she was, you know, she, I can't even say she was conscious. I mean, her eyes were closed. Like, she was basically on a level of life support, which we didn't even realize at the time. But the nurses, the doctors who were talking to us later on in the day were basically like, no, you don't quite understand. Like, this thing that is breathing this air, this oxygen into her trach, that is what's keeping her alive. So then we have this realization where we're like, oh, so is this literally a life support situation? Like, are we having to make the call to take her off of it? And they were like, I mean, yeah, basically. So, it's Sunday night. My dad and I are exhausted. My dog had to, be taken care of. She was out at the house, but I was like, I can't, Dad, I don't have this doesn't feel right. This doesn't feel good. I cannot leave her. He was not as comfortable staying as I was. So basically it was determined. He was like, okay, I'm going to go home. I'm going to take care of Princess. Let's revisit this tomorrow morning, because I don't think either of us are in a position to make this decision. I wish I could explain this whole situation, you guys, and just how we both weren't ourselves. Like, we were not okay. We were not in a good headspace. I had never seen my dad like this before in my life. It was just very surreal. So I think the plan was that, oh, actually, no, I take this back. My plan originally was also to go home and come back with my dad the next morning. And I got a call, and this is such a bittersweet part of this story. In California, oftentimes it'll rain in December, and I was driving through this really beautiful part of the county, and there was this double rainbow over these mountains. It was like, I've never seen anything like this before. And I was pulled over with many other cars taking pictures of this. And I got a call from the hospital, and they were like, hey, so, mom's blood pressure is dropping. You might want to come back. She's not doing very well. And I turned immediately around, got up to the room, got to see her, spoke to some nurses and doctors, could not even tell you what was said. But that's when I determined that I was staying the night. I was not going anywhere. Was not allowed to stay the night in the ICU. So I found a hotel nearby. My now husband, then boyfriend at the time, got off work, brought some clothes. I got Taco Bell for dinner. I mean, I was like, and anybody who's listened to any other episodes of this podcast before, my affinity with Taco Bell, and how Taco Bell pretty much got me through my mom's death. But anyway, went to this hotel and just, I literally was the first thing I ate that day. I don't even know how I ate it, to be honest with you, but I nibbled on it. Because I just knew that if anything happened to her, or if she was really on her path to dying that night, I did not want to be anywhere else in this world. So lo and behold, I get a call around maybe like 2:15, 2:20-ish. I can't even remember, but it was in the 2:00 hour. And it was this very sweet nurse. And she said, hey, sweetie, like, you might want to come over here. Mom's like, the blood pressure's dropping even more. I don't think she has much longer. So you might want to come over here. And I told her, I was like, you call me any time of night, please. Like, wake me up. I will be there. So we drive over. I was shaking. I mean, I was shaking in the car. It was cold. I felt panicked. I felt unsettled. I was petrified I was going to miss it, that she was going to die alone. Thankfully, we got there quickly. I ran up. I checked in. I did whatever I had to do. And Um, I sat with her. My husband sat out in the waiting room. Just all I needed at the time. I didn't want him in there. And mind you, he had not seen her for months. Like throughout her entire decline, he basically didn't see her because she was in such a state that I was like, this is her journey. Like, I don't need to be bringing people into this. So he didn't really get to say goodbye to her, which looking back on it now makes me a little sad, to be honest. But, and I just sat with her for probably a good hour. And then it was getting close to 3:30 in the morning. And because of the way that she was on this life support, but it was with her trach, right? So it was like kind of making her chest go up and down. So, but what I remember very vividly is I was just there. I was holding her hand. I was crying. I was talking to her. Because the nurse was so sweet. She was like, she can hear you. Talk to her. Make sure you talk to her and just say whatever you want to say. So I was doing that. And in this like kind of moment of silence, I could see and hear like an audible, like bigger breath than usual. And I thought it was a little strange. And I was like, instinctually, I think I knew that was her last breath, but it was misleading because of the life support. And this, again, angel of a nurse comes over and she was like, oh, like, sweetie, now I'm going to cry. Sweetie, she's gone. She's gone. And literally my first words were like, oh, she is? Because I couldn't tell. I didn't know. Even though I had, I realized a few minutes later, I was like, oh God, I think that was her last breath that I saw. But it was hard to tell. So I was like, oh, okay. And I kind of just sat there trying to figure it out, process, and just be like, oh my God, my mom is like, she's dead. She's gone. And then shortly after called my dad and I was like, hey, mom's gone. And I wish I could remember what he said. I really do. I don't remember verbatim, to be honest. It's such a blur, right? You black some of these things out. But I think, he said something similar to me, like, oh God. Like I do remember him saying, oh God. Like she's going. And I was like, yeah. I was like, you want to come up here, Dad? You want to say bye to her and be with her? And so we did. I'd sat with her for a while. And again, not to be too graphic here, but basically just her, her skin started getting cold and it was really hard for me to feel that, to experience. I couldn't do that. I wanted to feel her still warm. So it felt right to leave. And I wanted my dad to have his moments with her by himself anyway. So my husband and I left and he drove us back to the hotel and I was just in complete and utter shock and a level of, sorry, this is hard, a level of sadness that I had never experienced before in my life. It was a new level of emptiness that is hard to describe unless you've been there. So I will leave it at that. But it was really sweet. My dad came to the hotel after he saw her and just was like, he just gave me a hug. Like we just were there for each other for a little bit. He went home, still had the dog to take care of. We stayed at the hotel, but of course I didn't sleep. I just laid there. Eventually started calling people. We got a croissant and a coffee the next morning. We went to this little cafe. I was just still trying to wrap my head around things. And I actually just had this realization saying this out loud. I've never put this together before, you guys. I have such an affinity for coffee and croissants. And I like to think that that's my love of Europe and everything, but I actually think because just that little coffee and croissant brought me a little bit of joy that morning, that has always stayed with me. Have you heard about my brand new Losses Become Gains daily journal? I am so proud to announce you can now get your hands on it exclusively on Amazon. But trust me, you don't have to be someone who's grieving or someone who has gone through a loss to use and enjoy this journal. For over a year, I knew I wanted to create a beautiful daily practice in the form of a journal that wouldn't take you a super long time to complete, but will add so much value and perspective to your day, no matter what season of life that you're in. The prompts are specifically designed for people going through loss by someone who has also gone through loss, but it's just general enough for anyone to use and asks the important questions that, at least for grievers, I know for a fact that they need to have in front of them each and every day. It's a daily prompt with a separate page for writing more thoughts if more comes up for you. There are 6 months worth of prompts in this journal, so you can really see your growth and progress right before your eyes. It helps you get to the root of how you're actually doing and what you need to focus on in your healing journey or daily life overall. And it comes in 3 ocean inspired colors. Like the ocean, I want this journal to empower you to let it flow, allow yourself to really dig deep and go beyond the surface of your grief or whatever hardships are coming your way, and really feel the healing, growth, and evolution that I know you are so capable of. And all in just a matter of minutes per day, that will become a welcome part of your routine. I have no doubt. Type in Losses Become Gains on Amazon and be sure to scroll down to find all 3 colors or click the link in the show notes for details. Pick up your copy of the journal today or as a gift for someone who could use it. That's a pretty cool realization, actually, that I just had. So, yeah, we eventually we left. We checked out of the hotel. Husband went back to our apartment or wherever he had to go. I went to be with my dad, obviously. And, from there, the next few weeks, mind you, this is all right before Christmas. So I've joked about this and I've said this on the podcast before, but like the holidays may as well have not have existed that year. I'm pretty sure I celebrated in some way with my, now husband and his family, but like I was just with my dad, trying to be there with my dad a lot. He and I had a little kind of like father-daughter's day. That day we went to this restaurant that we out on the ocean that we all love to go to. And it was really special because that restaurant always reminded my dad of his dad. And so it was just a very full circle moment, but we were just incredibly empty and alone and distraught without my mom. And that was just the story of our life for weeks, after she was gone. And then I'll just kind of start wrapping this story up by saying this, for those who are struggling or will struggle with feeling like it's so abrupt when we lose somebody that it's hard to wrap your head around not having contact with them, never being able to, touch them, speak to them, have them call or text you, all of those things. That was such a reality for me that I literally went to a psychic medium like a couple weeks after my mom died because I was so desperate to talk to her. I was in such a state of dis-ease with the whole thing, I would have done anything. And it was like a beautiful session. I mean, the medium did an amazing job. Like I still go to her, to be honest, occasionally, but um, it was really sad at the same time because it was like the messages I was getting, and this is not to convince anybody here to go to a medium or anything. It was just, I'm just telling you my experience. She did, my mom didn't want to go. She was not ready to go. Like she had life to live. That's like really a very overarching message coming out of that. It was very, very difficult. And then, from there, my dad's cancer started worsening. And that's a whole nother story that I've shared on the podcast before, is for a different time. But, just to, I don't know, just close that chapter out. That's really the story of, how and when and all the logistics around my mom's death. But I think, what I want to shift into next is, just the most difficult parts of that and like just what that looked and felt like. And for me, there's so many things, right? And we're limited on our time here in this episode. So what I will share is this. Um, as I've mentioned, the emptiness and the loneliness were by far the most difficult aspects of it. Feeling just so lost without her, not being able, like I said, to hug her, to talk to her. I mean, I told you guys this, like that she was my best friend. So was my dad in his own way. Especially being an only child, like it doesn't mean that my grief is worse or anything. That's not at all what I'm saying. It's just a very different, it's a unique dynamic that you have with your parents. And I've just felt like no one understood me. No one could understood me. No one could get it. And I still feel that way to this day. And, again, being the only child, I mean, there really is no one that can understand what it is, what it means to be the child of Lori Jordan. So that has been just that continuous struggle with me. That is something I've had to learn to live with, is just like, that's never really going to go away, right? There's never going to, she's not going to have any other kids crop up, right? Like I met. So that is really something difficult to wrap my head around. And really, I mean, again, I say this, being 4 years out now, because this is a reflection on where I am now. It's all of the big and all of the small things, you guys. That's it. It's all of the milestones that she hasn't been here for. It's, me getting married and being at 2 wedding ceremonies. So she wasn't there for either one of those. Job changes, me buying my new car, like currently, getting pregnant, being here throughout this process. And I'll touch more on that in a little bit. But, it's just all of the day-to-day things. I talk about this a lot on the podcast, in my offerings and things like that. Grief is it's the acute grief, right? It is what we are feeling the moment they die, the moment that they are taken from us, the moment that they leave this physical world. But it's so much more than that. It's the day-to-day life that I feel is so just extra painful and is not talked about enough. That's why I'm so passionate about that, and, living this intentional life after loss and really digging into that and what that means when we're ready. And I know that's what she would have wanted for me too, though. That's the thing. Like, I like to think that she inspired me to be in this place that I am in my life right now. Like, and actually, this is a beautiful transition into some of the things that I loved about my mom, and some things that I learned from her that, I don't share this just to continue necessarily talking about myself here. I think these are some great life lessons that any of us can take away right now. So, um, Sorry if I'm at all skipping around here. Again, I'm just really letting this come through however it comes through. But I actually think this is a good segue. So, you know, those are some of the things that I'll just say was probably the most, difficult was, like I was saying, it was all of the guttural, massive, like aspects of her death in the beginning. But really, ever since then, it's when people stop checking on you, right? Yet you're still feeling it. It's that the grief still stays with us for years, right? And we have to continuously grapple with that. We have to continuously grieve their loss. And then, as I was mentioning, this is the one thing I just wanted to mention here with these milestones is that, nobody warns you how difficult those can be. And, there's you kind of have to like re-grieve every time something like that comes up. But then it's also just these little moments where what I wouldn't give to get a text from her, right? What I wouldn't give to have another one of our hour or two long conversations or to go shopping with her or go on a walk or whatever it is. And so it's all of those little in between moments. That's it. So to get into some of the things that I loved about my mom and that I learned from her. And again, I feel like these are some things that we can all like universally, learn from. This is not necessarily so unique to me or my mom, but one thing she certainly taught me was to not take anything too seriously in life. You know, be serious and be passionate and things about the things that we do, of course, give things our all, but also like just laugh, enjoy, live in joy. Our time here is so limited. If you have lost a loved one, if you've experienced loss in any capacity, whether it's a loved one or otherwise, like that. Things can be taken away from you just like that, drop of a hat, right? So, what are you here for? What are you living here for? Are there things that we can maybe lighten up on a little bit and let go? Let go and let live, as they say, right? And also to enjoy the small things. My mom was a rose queen. She was the aficionado of roses. She loved roses. She had prints. Oh my God, you guys, you should have seen our couch and chairs from the 90s. It literally had it was rose printed, you guys. Okay. It was actually kind of hideous, but she just had this thing for roses. And anytime she would take us to, a rose garden or we would pass some roses if we were just on a walk one day, she would quite literally always, without fail, stop and smell the roses. She was the walking embodiment of stop and smell the roses to a point where it actually got annoying sometimes. We'd be in the middle of a sentence or we'd be in the middle of a good walk or whatever, and she'd be stopping left and right. And I was like, Mother, please, let's go. Let's move it along. But now I laugh about that and I make sure I do the same thing. And another sort of funny thing is that things aren't about me. Things aren't always about me. They're not about ourselves. As beings, as humans, we can be, let's just call a spade a spade. We can be very egocentric beings. We kind of live for ourselves, right? Like we can have good intentions, right? Like we might live for our family. We want to serve, we give back to people, of course. I'm not saying we're all like super selfish here. But one thing that she always said to me, this is more when I was a teenager, and like, God forbid I walked out of the house, without mascara on or my hair wasn't perfectly curled or whatever. And she would literally say to me, I'm paraphrasing now, but she was like, Tara, no one's paying attention to you as much as you think they are. And I was like, excuse me, at the time, of course, I'm like, everyone's going to notice if I, don't have my lipstick on. But it made me laugh, but it also, there was a bigger message there, right? And it's like, no one's paying attention as much as you think they are. Everyone's got their own things going on. You know that if you've been through some grief and you see how the world continues on, people move forward. People have other priorities, right? That are important to them. So I think really the moral of that story is it's not so much like, things aren't about you, don't try, right? Like that's not the message. But it's just that we can take some pressure off of ourselves. We don't have to be perfect. We don't have to worry so much. We don't have to necessarily get caught up on every little detail, right? Getting something out there, doing something big, doing something meaningful in big and small ways, like it's better than trying to be perfect. You don't have to be perfect. Another thing she taught me and really instilled in me was my independence. My parents had a beautiful marriage. They had their ups and downs, absolutely, like any other couple would. But she did such an amazing job of instilling this independence in me and going after the things I want and kind of not necessarily like needing a man or needing anybody else to validate me or to support me. And like, of course, that's a benefit. That's something, of course she wants that for me, right? She would want that behavior from a husband for me to be supportive in all the things. But simply put, she was a ambitious, super smart, crafty, really clever woman. And I like to think I got some of that from her. I'm scrappy, right? And I embody my independence. I love my independence. And it's something that's very important to me. And it's just this really empowering feeling of like, man, I can stand on my own 2 feet. I have got this. And it's not for a lack of like needing anybody else. It's not like I'm just like, shooing everybody away or being like, I don't need you. But, again, I think it's really more the empowerment perspective and really just living in alignment and living the truest expression of ourselves. And that is such a gift. That is such a beautiful thing to be able to share and pass on with somebody. And another aspect of this, something she taught me was, finding something I love to do in my life. My dad actually really instilled this in me too. I have to give him some credit here. I've talked about him before, but he was this incredible criminal defense attorney. And he really embodied like, if you do something you love, you will not feel like you're working a day in your life. And that was very much him. So they really both actually instilled this in me. But, again, doing something you love in life, finding your purpose, finding your why for being here, which again, that's a really empowering thing. And I know 4 years out now that I have done that. And I never envisioned myself in the grief space. I did not think I'd lose my parents this soon. But guess what? Here I am. And I know that I was meant to be a teacher, a guide, a empath, a visionary in the grief space. And I don't say visionary to be so like boastful. It's not about that. Literally the term visionary is one of my Dharma archetypes. If you're not familiar with Dharma archetypes, please look them up. Sahara Rose is an amazing resource for this. I learned so much of this from her. Anyway, but that's why I say visionary there. And it's, that teacher, that guide, that empath, that visionary aspect of myself was always in there. I've always felt that, but I never felt it in a way that really clicked. And then when my parents died, I was like, oof. Not only have I been through some grief, I know what this feels like, but I'm going to take this a step further. I'm going to help and guide and teach and be there for people. I just want to be someone's North Star. That's it. Like, and not so that they're praising me or anything like that. It's just to be like, I've walked this path too. Let's walk it together. You're not alone. That's it. And my mom was always so supportive of this want and ability to teach and to guide. Seriously, you guys, it has been something I've been doing since I was literally 4 or 5 years old. Like I was always pretending and playing teacher, literally to the point where in the East Coast, when we lived in Pennsylvania, she like redid half of our basement and made it into like a mock classroom. Like, these are some of the beautiful things that my parents did for me that I was like, you never understand the selflessness that some of our parental figures have at the time. You know what I mean? You realize these things years later. Ugh, I don't want to get emotional about this, but actually I will get emotional about this if I if I need to, because she was just so thoughtful in everything she did. Um, and just to really enable me and empower me to be that teacher if I wanted to. And then that came up for me again. I literally moved to a different country. I moved to Italy to get my EFL, my English as a foreign language certification, so I could teach. Like, teaching's a part of me. I don't know what to say. So, and they empowered me to do that. They were like, hell yeah, go. Oh my God, go to Italy. Are you kidding me? Like, when are you leaving? And then they came and visited me while I was there. It was beautiful. It was the last family trip we had. It was the last, almost second to last family trip we had. You know, being 4 years out now, there's just more about life that I understand. There's more about loss that I understand clearly. um, it's deeper than us. It's so much deeper than this physical, very material world that we live in. And it's it's just about how we continue our relationship with our loved ones, and the importance of that, and the importance of finding that. And wherever you are in your grief today, if you're earlier on, like, please, feel free, take this with a grain of salt, right? Just put this in the back of your mind for a little while. These are things sometimes that we might be a little too early on to hear, but I think it's important to hear these things, because it took me hearing someone say things like this multiple times for me to believe it, and for me to be really like, oh, they might be onto something here. So bear with me. Take all of this, just take all of this in today. But if nothing else, grief can really give us a level of compassion and empathy that we have never experienced before, that we didn't know before, that is so deep and so profound. And there is no comparing that feeling. I almost can't even put it into words. It's just something, if you've been there, if you're going through it. And, I just can't believe I'm even saying the 4-year mark that she's been gone. I cannot believe it's been 4 years. It kind of feels like it was just yesterday, especially as I'm telling the story, things are really coming up for me that, even though certain details and things have escaped me, not even just over the years, but I think even the night that it happened, just trauma and blacking things out. I remember certain parts of her health decline. I remember certain parts of her death. I remember certain moments in the weeks after, like it happened 10 minutes ago. And it's so wild to me and so unsettling at the same time, I know. And especially being at this like 3-4 year mark, this happens to a lot of people, but it's like we still feel close, but we're also starting to feel really far away, if that makes sense. And I'm that's what's almost comforting, is I'm realizing this is actually fairly common. It's to be in this weird spot where, we're perhaps feeling a bit disconnected, and in this really weird place between feeling like it just happened yesterday, but also that it wasn't that long ago. You remember things really vividly, but then you also forget details. It's so crazy. It's such a strange place to be. But it's hard because I don't want to lose that, right? I don't want to feel like I'm losing her. I don't want to feel too far away. In fact, there are days where I feel panicked a little bit about being 4 years out from losing her. It's hard, you guys. Like, we don't want to feel further away from our loved ones, even if in the last moments or days or weeks or whatever that we saw them were not good, if their quality of life was not good, that's hard to let go of that tether. this is a whole nother conversation, but there are things called attachment bonds, and there's something to that, right? We don't want to lose our people. And I think what is and always will be hard is that as much as we say our relationship with our loved one has changed and will continue to change, and that's true, we can find signs and symbols and tap into these beautiful moments where we know they're with us, no doubt. It simply cannot make up for the fact that they're not here. We do miss them and their physical absence, and that can be brutal and gut-wrenching and heartbreaking. And that can feel nearly impossible to get used to. I just want to validate that today. And, a lot of grievers worry they might begin to forget things about their loved one, especially around this 3-4 year mark, like their voice, their mannerisms, things that they would or wouldn't say to us. And by the way, I keep bringing up this 3 to 4 year time frame. This can be at any point, you guys. There's no rule book here, right? Certainly not with grief. So this is just my experience. But moral of the story, it is stressful and it's unsettling. And I worry about this all the time, especially being an only child. I almost feel like there's this added layer of pressure on me to remember certain things, or like if I die, then it dies with me. These memories or whatever goes with me. So I question myself. I second guess myself, and oh my God, am I remembering right? I worry about those things sometimes. And actually, literally just last night, she'll show up in my dreams occasionally. So will my dad. I wish it was more. That's amazing and surreal. I have had some actually very profound and borderline life-changing dreams, to be honest. And this episode's not about that, so I won't get into that. But, it's a reminder that she and my dad are still around and they want to be involved. And so often our loved ones will come to us in dreams because we're so, in a state of distraction and busyness. And, our mind is going, going, going throughout the day. So that is, my medium told me this too, but this is something I very much believe, is that sometimes that's the only time they can get through to us. So, I know some people struggle with dreams though, or, if you're like my husband, he's like, I never remember my dreams. That's something you can ask for it. Ask the universe, ask God, ask whoever you want, ask your loved ones, journal about that, journal about it and ask for more, because they might just give it to you. You never know. And, it's really just that feeling of God, I wish I could just ask them a question. I wish I could fact check this. I wish I could, whatever it is. If I had $1 for every time that, I was talking to somebody or someone brought something up and like, oh, I wonder what mom and dad would say about this. Or, oh, I couldn't remember when they lived in Florida and when they moved to Michigan or whatever. And I'm like, oh my God, I wish I could just freaking ask, but I can't. I don't have either one to ask. That was so hard at first. Honestly, it's happened enough times now where I've had to just sort of get used to it. And I am sort of used to that frustration, if I'm being honest, of not being able to do that. But it never really gets easier. It gets more frustrating sometimes. But that all being said, I really do want to start wrapping this episode up. I wanted to stay here. I mentioned this earlier, but as someone who is currently pregnant, I think this is important to say. If there's anybody here who is planning a family, who is also maybe pregnant as well, but missing a mom or a dad or some parental figure, or if this is just going to be you in the future, this grief and this loss of a mother figure especially, but just a parent loss in general, it's amplified when you are bringing a new life into this world. I really can't describe it, but what I can say is I need my mom. I miss her deeply, and even at 32, I still need my mom for things. I just want to be able to go to her for questions. Hey, what did you do back then when you were pregnant with me, just have those kinds of conversations. And like I said, I pride myself on being a strong, independent woman and all the things, but like, damn, we need our moms for a lifetime. We need our dads. We need these important people. And if you're grieving someone like that, just please know how seen you are today. I am so in this boat with you. It's not fair. It never feels fair. It's never going to feel fair when we lose them. With where kids are concerned, we always talked about her being the best grandma or whatever she would have been called. Probably not grandma. That was probably too old sounding for her. She would have come up with something else. She was so, so sweet with babies and kids. I mean, she was like kind of a kid herself sometimes. So she was just a baby whisperer. I've seen it so many times. It was so funny to watch. And she just had such a gentle, soft, warm, and cozy way with kids. It was exactly how she was with me. She was very maternal, so lucky. And, now I find myself not only grieving her not being here for me, but now it's none of that, none of this pregnancy process, none of any of these things that I'm going through that I wish I could talk to her about, none of my child's childhood, none of their adulthood, however much she would have been here for it, none of that. So, that's really been coming up for me, especially coming up on the holidays and all the things. I have been feeling some very immense gratitude lately, if I'm being honest. Like, I realize how fortunate I am in so many aspects of my life. But even that can't make up for some of these voids and these holes that I feel. So, deep breath. I just want to encourage you today. If you're at a point where you feel like you just won't get used to this new reality of yours, this new normal of yours, without whatever loved one that you have lost or whatever your loss is, right? This could be divorce. This could be a sense of self, your identity, right? Like I lost, well, not the divorce, but I lost that sense of self and identity as I was going through the loss of my mom and my dad as well. I understand that, but I am actually going to challenge you to not think about it that way today. And what I mean by that is don't force yourself to get used to it. And don't force yourself to feel like you need to feel right about their death and come to terms with it, right? Like there's almost this, I really don't love the word acceptance. So I'm going to say this resignation. That word really came from someone else I did a podcast recording with, so I'll give him credit for that. But it's more of this logical understanding that, okay, they're not here. And with time, we do understand and, quote, get used to doing life without them here. We start to understand and process what that looks like and what that feels like. That is not easy. And like I said, that comes with just rewiring of the brain and time and grief work and all the things. But as I was saying, we don't need to force that process, and we cannot force that process. That is not healthy, and that's also not realistic, in my opinion. And I think many out there would agree. And when I say it's not healthy, it's just like we just can't hope that time alone is going to cure us or certainly tamp down our emotions and feelings and not process them. That's what I mean there. So what it is now is just figuring out what your new normal looks like and embracing that along with your grief. Having it be your friend as opposed to your frenemy, right? And this can mean finding new things that you love to do. This can mean finding new hobbies, self-improvement, learning a new language or skill, tapping into a career you never thought you'd do. I mean, I could go on here and I say those examples purposely because those are all things that I've done, right? Like I was talking about my spirituality, my more spiritual side. Like I've gotten into that more than ever. I've read some absolutely life-changing books since I've lost my parents. I have been better about language learning. I mean, some of these, yeah, maybe they're a little bit of a distraction, but they're healthy distractions and they challenge you and they force you to grow and learn a little bit. So it can actually be really beautiful if we embrace that process because, like I said, loss is more than just the grief that we feel. The grief is profound and very, very important. Trust me, I don't want to minimize that at all. But I know so many of us struggle with things that go deeper than that. Seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, right? Like just the day to day, feeling like we are just existing and just hanging on by a thread and not really living like we should be. And, figuring out where to go next or what to do with ourselves. This is very much how I felt when my dad eventually died too, when both parents were gone. I questioned my decisions and choices and what I wanted out of my life. I contemplated moving. There's so many things that I was like, okay, I'm embracing this now. Like, I've never been more open to the opportunities in life than I have been since my parents died. I mean, I thought I was throughout my 20s. I've done some things. I've been to some places. I've done some cool stuff, but like loss and grief can crack and break us open in ways that we could not even begin to imagine. So I just want you to feel empowered by that today. And, by integrating our soul's purpose and thinking about that, in addition to our grief, what we are meant to be doing here in our lifetime, and not only addressing our grief at hand, but incorporating this soul's purpose, our dharma, into our experience and knowing that our world doesn't have to come to an end when our loved ones die, that is a really spectacular feeling. Just trust me on that. If you are not there yet, please give this some thought today. And I know this because I have been there. I am there. I have done the work. And this mindset and being broken open to all of this has quite literally transformed my life. I can't even put a finer point on it than that. It has just transformed my life. In fact, it was handling my grief this way and sort of tackling both my loss and my acute grief and my new life and what I really wanted out of it now, who am I now that my parents are gone, that allowed me to get to the point in my life that I'm at now. So like I said, it is so much of our grief. It's these little moments in our daily life. It is living intentionally and with purpose after loss. So I just want to end this by saying it is possible. It is so possible for you today. Use the lessons that Lori Jordan brought to this world that we've talked about today and just discover things that make you feel happy and whole, because I promise they are out there. Whether this is with your career or relationships or whatever this is, your soul is a beautiful being that deserves to enjoy its time here. Loss is earth-shattering. It's something we may never feel particularly comfortable with, which is fair, but there is some purpose in the pain, right? It's not that our losses had to happen for a reason per se, but there is purpose in the pain. There are gains to be found in your losses. So I just want you to remember that, walk away with that today. All right. Thank you, thank you, thank you from the bottom of my heart, if you have made it this far, for hanging out with me as I reflected back on 4 years without my mom. I honestly still cannot believe I'm saying that out loud. I am sending you endless amounts of love today. And to whoever you have lost, or if you are in the process of losing someone, my heart goes out to you either way. Whatever adversity or difficulty you're journeying through, please remember, as always, you're not alone. There are resources and tools to help you. There are ways to work with me if you feel so inclined. All of this is on my website and linked in the show notes. And I'm just sending you the biggest virtual hug ever. So have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next episode. I am sending you a huge thank you for tuning into today's episode, my friend. I'm so grateful you're here and for the steps that you're taking to heal your heart, open your mind, fulfill your soul, to learn, grow, and evolve, and move through this crazy thing called life in big, beautiful, impactful ways. Visit lossesbecomegains.com for my blog and for more coping tools. Explore my Grief Becomes Gains online course if you need some extra grief support and coaching. And be sure you're following along on Instagram and Facebook at Losses Become Gains podcast. I love seeing new faces, meeting new people, hearing your story, and supporting you however I can. And remember to always keep asking yourself, how will I turn my losses into gains today? I'll catch you in the next episode.